What's up? What's up, everybody? Happy Thursday to everybody. First Thursday of December. That's right. The last rant of the new year, of the old year, I should say. But as always, here's my my good friend Laura. Laura, how are you, my friend?
I'm great.
Good to hear. Good to see
Yes.
you. Yeah, absolutely. Today we got a good one for you. We've had these. Laura and I have talked about communication before. We've talked about different kinds of generations before. We've talked about workplace production before. And really, we're going to spin all those into one today to kind of look at a pain point that has been coming up at Lions Guide with a lot of our clients and our customers, and them asking and talking about the difference of, how do I get my employees to engage? How do I communicate with them when there's all different types of people want to talk about things? And, they want to be communicated to in different ways, if that makes sense. And what do you do? How do you attack all of them and make it as smooth as possible? Because I think we all know, and I think Laura would agree to this too, communication is the key to all of it, right? Like anything. I don't care if it's an operation during war, during peace, or if it's a small business, a large business. You communicating with your employees is really paramount to that.
Yeah, because we don't live in a world anymore where it's let's have a staff meeting once a week where you get all your information. There's emails. There's you could be on text. You could be on the inner office texting mechanism. You could somebody could prefer a phone call or just sit by the water cooler and socialize and hear it that way. There's so many different ways. And then, think outside your business. Now you've got Facebook and TikTok and Instagram. And so you have to hit all these modalities in order to reach your audience.
Yeah, I think that's, this made me go back. Laura and I had talking about this and really bringing those three concepts together with communication. I had to go back and think about how, when I was sitting in the seat as a CMC, there were archaic, I don't want to say super archaic, but there was like phone trees, and like you had to be near your phone or in your house or whatever. And like, that wasn't true anymore. I mean, it's the simplicity of just saying we have cell phones now. Everybody has one. It wasn't even like people could say, well, I don't have one. Like, because there was that time where people were like, well, I don't have one of those. You can't make me get it. And like I couldn't, like we always had that thing kind of like, well, what if someone didn't have a driver's license? What would you do? Like, could you make them go get one type of a deal? So it's been interesting to think about communication and how it's changed. I've looked at little communication pieces for just my kids and like how that's changed, and messaging has gone away. Like you're like they don't even use like the messages on the iPhone. They have to use an app that has a different messaging system within it, because that's what's quote unquote popular. That's the only way that it works. And it's been, honestly, a lot of my deep thought on this had gone back to my children and saying, I don't understand why you can't message. She's like, well, that's not where the group is. The group is in this other version of it. And business has to kind of operate the same way and looked at the same way of saying, what do you need to do? So you had a first initial thought on this, though, about the differences of communication. I wanted you to enlighten that.
Like my thought via the text that we
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm looking at it as, I've held a few different jobs, and there's always some people who prefer I only want to communicate via email because that's my checklist. That's my mode of communication, and that's what I prefer. And so like, okay, if I want something done by this person, I know I'm gonna have to email that person. But then I know if I want to get somebody else's brain or somebody else to do something, email's probably not the most efficient. They might have their text messages open and that's their checklist. Right. Or you might have the socialite who just wants to talk about it and then ask all the questions at the same time and get all the information right away, and then they're ready to go. So as a leader, the question is, do you try to adhere to everybody's different communication styles, or do you ask them to adhere to yours? Or is there a middle ground? And I think it really depends on what kind of business you have and how many people are in your business.
Yeah, and I think you have to find a foundation, right? So I'll bring it to everyday leadership of like making sure that you have your foundation of whatever that's going to be, right? And so I would agree with you that it probably is multi-platformed at this point, where you have to do maybe a few different versions of how you do that, because it may be, put it this way, if you do them correctly, some of them can be very swiftless and painless to be able to post something on three different mediums that, right, could be simple, easy, right? It's one piece of information that you can take three different ways.
Hmm.
And sometimes I think, as leaders, if you're more traditional, I think you have to be able to get into the new, whatever the new systems are, whatever those are, to some degree, right? Like if
So
you
isn't
go
isn't
ahead.
this ironic though? Didn't we create technology to expedite things in our lives and to make things easier? And now all of a sudden we've got 500 different ways to communicate.
Yeah, but I think it's so, sure, you're right. However, I think there's an adaptation, right? And there's an acceptance of all those different mediums. And it's, I think more than that, it's the changing, it's how fast it's being changed on the fly,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So Facebook is irrelevant to young kids, and like that's not irrelevant. It's our generation that used it the most when it was there, or our
Still there.
I know, but like, or even whatever it is, right? It's now it's Snap, it's TikTok, it's whatever, and that's, I think too, what we're finding is though it's moving at the speed of that. You have to, okay, maybe your business says we need to do this for X amount of time. This is what it is. Maybe you're bringing in a new customer who's, or a new employee who's like, that's archaic to me. We're using this now versus that, but that's fine. Your company needs to make a stand at something, and maybe they can't move at that speed, right?
Yeah.
Communication speeds are what they are. Like if they're not consistent and over time, right? You're gonna have problems with it. If you're changing all the time, that's difficult as well. Right now, you're telling everybody to go get a new account about something, right? So you have to have some type of a time frame as well. But I think it all boils down to what you talked about, which is, and kind of what you asked was, you got to have a foundation for your business and what's going to work for you, right? What a pizzeria may use this versus a telecom company may use this versus whatever may use this. So I would agree with you in saying, whatever you're going to do, I would somewhat, pick your foundation and make that, okay, this is what we're going to do, right? And if you're in the real old and you need to update, then maybe you have to do that.
We were just in, I was just in a city planning meeting, and we are a city that our average age is 45, and Facebook is still huge. It's the way that everybody goes to look at events that are happening. And if we want to bring in younger generations, I brought up the point that we have to start advertising on TikTok and Instagram and using those as well. Otherwise, we're missing an entire demographic that we want to bring in.
I would agree that if you're like, so where you work, right? And for those that don't know, she worked kind of for the city in a particular genre. You're a mainstay, right? That city's not going anywhere, and all its services are going to be there, right? So the services have to evolve with the times, because you're trying to make the city and keep the city relevant. Even if you're trying to preserve heritage within a city or whatever, I can think about old cities that want to preserve. You still have to, do posts, right? There's very few businesses that can probably survive, right, without some type of social media support in some way, shape, or form. Right?
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying they're not out there, and I'm not, but again, I just think that it's real little. I would agree with you. If you don't adapt, you're going to die. We all know that in some way, shape, or form. And I think you're right in that kind of sense of it all. But I guess that leads to then what's, I think there's some overarching tones that are, no matter what, we know you have to adapt. We know you have to do something. So, but still, and I look back at when Dale and I did The Truth About Employee Engagement, because this is really about the communication and engaging your people of how they want to be interacted with. I think you still need to stay clear and concise no matter what you do, right? And you need to set the tone at the top of saying, this is how we're going to do this. This is why we do it this way. And this is, but you're open to, hey, what are the new ideas? Maybe there's a new thing that we're not ready for yet because of X, Y, and Z, whatever. That's fine. Maybe that's just not what you're trying to do, right? For you guys, you're like, and again, I think we could say Parks and Rec. We don't have to say where, but Parks and Rec. You may not be hitting the demographic of like young kids because they're not the buyers. The buyers are the parents of those young kids.
Yep.
So now you're trying to, what are their kind of targets? And I think you could do that. If you graded all of the social media pieces for communicating and said to yourself, what do we need externally to communicate? What do we need internally to communicate? I think you could probably pare it down to what is mainly your staff, and then having people adapt to that target, and versus what you're doing externally as well to say, okay, our target engagement out in town is going to be X, right? We want to hit this X demographic. Well, this is the X demographic that lines up to it, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. And like I said, with employees too, I think you got to pick your poison with your channels and say, okay, this is what we're going to do because the rest of it is wasteful, right? Like we can't do it on every single person. There is some adaptation on both sides, right? Yes. I mean, you think about it. I was reading something the other day. I was reading an article on NPR and it's saying that one of the biggest casualties of the internet and the communication era, really, of what we're living in is disability, like people with disabilities, like being blind or being blind, is what it was. And it was just because like all that information is there, but they can't, it's very difficult for them to digest it all, right? Without sight. It's right. It's a click button thing. It's that kind of stuff. And it slowly gets adapted, but you could think about that and say, well, if I had, someone with disabilities, how would I communicate with those people? It's no different when you say, well, I've got all these people who learn and take in information in different ways. How do I adapt? How do I hit as many of those targets as I can with our choices for communication? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that if it's a one-on-one situation and I need to get something done and the person prefers email, I'm going to email them. I think that's important for leaders to know. Like it all goes back to know your people and have an idea of their needs and how they perform best. And if you can accelerate performance by just adapting a little bit to their needs, I mean, that's huge. That shows that you care a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that you have to be still, as a leader anyway, you still have to be good with face-to-face, right? Like, and whether that's Zoom face-to-face or whether it's real face-to-face, like you have to be able to go one-on-one with somebody and communicate something in some way, shape, or form. Like whatever you're going to do, I think you have to be able to do this as well. Because I think, and this is just me thinking about it, everybody will appreciate that when it comes from a human element side, whether it's a more traditionalist. If I'm talking to an older person, I know, the old art of the handshake is what they used to call it, of being able to look someone in the eye and say, I trust you, versus signing a contract, that type of a thing, versus even someone who's younger and them maybe not realizing what it means until later, but understanding, okay, this person is serious. This is where it got this way. And, there's a little piece of it there as well. But I think that one-on-one, not over email, and not through a text or through a messaging system, but just being able to talk to them one-on-one, I think is absolutely still vitally important.
Yeah. It's funny you just said handshake, because I just read this week about Simon Sinek writing about, if you're going to do a deal and you go to shake somebody's hand at the end of the deal and they're like, sorry, I don't shake hands. All of a sudden you're going to feel really icky about that deal.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is definitely, new age stuff. I mean, and I think too, it's about, I love doing it, but I hate it. I hate going back to being honest, consistent, and transparent about what you're doing, right? If you're being able to do that, even in the art of a deal, to know, that's where those back channel things work, right? Where an assistant gets to an assistant and goes, hey, by the way, my boss doesn't shake hands. I just want you to know. So don't, like, that's still, Like, if you don't think, like, it's an art form. Like, as the CMC, I used to back up my CO and go, hey, you don't like that. Nope, that's not good. Don't do it. Just because you don't want to put people in weird positions or whatever. And you may never know, and it may not be that big where you have somebody like that. But, that's where a good right hand, person is just, it's good to have those, that's really specific. But I think in that kind of thing, something I wanted to round back to, and I'll let everybody, I'm going to give everybody a synopsis. There was this Indian, I think it was in an architectural engineering conference or whatever that it was taken at. It wasn't a TED Talk. It wasn't official. It looked like it was just filmed kind of, but there was this Indian business person, and another gentleman came up and said, I have a problem with employees being loyal, and they're just always moving all over. And we've never talked about it. It has circulated through the Lions Guide instructors all over the place in our staff. And I wanted to bring it up here because I think it's important, and Laura's seen it, and it was really good take. So for those who didn't know, Laura, the first time Laura ever came on Lions Guide, she came on as a guest for the book. And we were talking about leading generations. Actually, she might have come on before that, because I think you ended up coming on before, and then we came on for your book later in the month, I think.
Yeah, it was months later. So
that's
leading
right.
generations was like in May.
Yeah, it was your first kind of just come on, and and so we were talking about generationally, and Laura's background, not only as the military MP, but as a high school principal and everything. She's led in various sectors of kind of life that have with different age groups in each one. And I think at that time, before this perspective came out that this Indian gentleman gave us, I think it was, this one was pretty, it hit me pretty well to think about the core of people versus the outer shells versus as to what they say and do, right? So their actions, those three things.
And it's a broader range as opposed
Absolutely.
to the very tight generations.
Yeah. And so he clarified it in three. He tied it to revolutions, which I thought was pretty interesting. So first he tied it to the Industrial Revolution, which motivation at the Industrial Revolution was not about loyalty. It was about staying alive. It was about getting a paycheck. It was about surviving and getting through. This is the Great Depression era. This is the World War II eras, and before, this is these types of things where industry was taking over, those types of stuff. And people were just, we weren't able to fight diseases as often as we could. And I did a lot of research about the time frames and what they kind of meant. And then we moved after that into this informational revolution, which people then were motivated because they had information or wanted to go get it. So this is where Steve Jobs, this is where, Bill Gates, this is where these guys who had this information that no one else did, and it was on the cusp of everything that was coming up. This is when the internet boom happened. This is when all these people had this information that no one else did. And then it kind of died in 2008 when the third revolution really started, which is we're still in. And that's really the social revolution of what drove people. So that informational revolution was, I had this information that you didn't have, but nowadays anybody can go on and learn how to code on YouTube. So it's not necessarily that piece anymore. Now it's since 2008, we've hit this social revolution where I'm more connected than anyone else, right? Influencers have come to the role. I'm now, zoomed into more people than anyone else is. It's kind of, as we thought the Hollywood star was dying, was the rise of this influencer star now has grown, and it's not so much more about being in a movie, but it's about being on here, right? And I thought that was really interesting when you talk about communication, because to the people who are still alive with that first industrial revolution, communication with them was it is the handshake, it is the eye to eye, it is the seeing your face for real and knowing that your trustworthiness and that kind of thing, and
that loyalty to your business or to your
correct
industry.
Like
that sense of, I started this, I'm going to finish it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And now it's like, well, I could start a podcast, and if it died, it dies. I'm not like, it's just on a whim, right? I got it. What's the next thing? On to the next one to make it more. And we're talking about 10 seconds. We had just got off Lions Guide earlier, and we were talking about how to reach potentials. And it was like, our time span, our attention span, right, in today's world is not, it's a 10-second it's a 10-second world, right? You got 10 seconds to make an impact on something. And that's an interesting piece. And it's not even that's it, right? You just have to, there's a bit of like, well, I want to see it again. I want to see that 10 seconds again and again and again. And it's an interesting little piece when it comes to communicating. Do you communicate the same way to your people, right? Do you communicate in the sense of saying, hey, maybe they just need short bursts of reminders, right? I mean, I think about drumbeat, like when you talk about drumbeat, saying something over and over again until it sticks. I kind of think maybe it's come back in a certain sense of just being in, just being there. So if I'm communicating with my people, maybe I over communicate, but not micromanage, right? There's a little, how do I do that, right? And remind people all the time and trust them. It's an interesting kind of paradox.
Like that, what's it called when it's on
loop? Yeah.
I've never communicated that way because I kind of despise circular talking where they repeat themselves and say it again a different way, just like I just did. But is that what this world is turning into? Do we need to be on loop for a little bit to get stuff done?
I've always, well, I don't know. I don't think as a leader, obviously I don't think as a leader, I think loop is a good thing, right? Like, but at the same time, I can understand if you have a generation who has a 10-second span, and every younger generation has an attention span less. I totally get that. I think you just aging process, you end up with it. But I think there's something to be said that I've always held that I understand that drumbeat works. There's a reason why it works. There's a reason why, you say it over and over again. You see it. Advertisers has been doing it for years, right? You see Bud Light over and over and over and over and over, and you go to the store, and what do they want you to do, right? It's in target line to your eyes, right? I mean, there's a whole science to it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that, again, I think you have to walk the fine line of over communicating versus micromanaging versus getting what you need done. Because Laura and I were talking about this a little bit for 5 minutes in the break. Like, at what point people need to communicate?
Yeah.
Like, and how much of that from a business perspective is, do you as the business leader want to dictate what that communication is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right? I mean, because
you want camaraderie. You want them to know about each other's lives. You want them to feel invested in each other because that keeps them around. But at the same time, how much of that conversation is taking away from productivity? So where's the fine line? So we talked about how, like, everything in moderation. And even you as the leader, you need to engage in those conversations once in a while so they know that you're human and that you can make connections and you understand a little bit more about your employees.
Yeah, because I think if you're first of all, if they're meeting the mission and they're meeting the requirements and they're doing what they're supposed to do and they're getting the results that you're asking them to do,
mm-hmm.
I think that's one thing that you have to do, right? Mm-hmm. If it's not on the paper and it's not in their position description, or it's not the expectation of the result that you want from them, I think then you have to say, okay, is this a byproduct of it? Because if you're doing the things you want to for employee engagement, right? And I can go back to the book and look at what job misery really, why people don't like their job, and it's irrelevance, anonymity, and then immeasurement. So that, like, how well am I doing what I'm doing? Am I supposed to be doing, and how well am I doing it? I think if you're covering those,
it has nothing to do with the isolation or feeling like you're not a part of a group.
Well, that's the anonymity portion, right?
Okay.
You need to make sure that you're feeling like you are part of the group, like your job matters of what it is, right? Mm-hmm. That's the irrelevance piece. But if you can cover those three and they're getting the job done, it's kind of tough, right? To sit there and go, and Laura and I can always tell you, you're in the military 24/7. So if they keep you there, they keep you there. But I can remember in my latter part of my career, kind of going, well, why are we here right now? We've got everything done for the day. We can't get any more done. Why are we still here? Mm-hmm. I think you could look at that too and saying, if you've told them, again, because I think a business leader would start to go, where do we start to cut costs, or where do our costs? I'd be interested to hear from people, about, is it more about, money, or is it more about how we, keep it together? It's an interesting conundrum. Like I want people to have camaraderie. I want them to chit chat about stuff. I want them, especially in a brick and mortar, right? I want them to be able to do those things. I want quality of life things for people who choose telework to say, you want to go off and do something. And I think the acceptance is that, okay, when it's time to work, it's time to work. When I need you to get something done and there's a deadline, get it done, right? And if you're producing quality results from it, I don't know. Like, to me, I'm like, well, do whatever you want then. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. Be available. If you need to be available during the time frame, though, of X amount of time, then you need to be available. But if you're not working on something because it's you choosing to do it at different time and you're producing, I don't know. I mean, I think
that goes kind of back to our conversation last month when we were talking about the quiet quitting, or I mean, okay, if I have time in my hands, I'm going to say, what more can I do? I'm going to say, what's in the next project? What else can I add to enhance the current role that I'm in? But then some people will be like, sweet, I got an extra hour. I'm going to go hang out with so-and-so in their office and we're going to chit chat or whatever, and so I think there's those.
But does either one matter? I mean, seriously, like, think about it. Like, if people are getting that's true employee performance, because at the end of the year, you as a leader right now, you're going to look at all your people and you're going to judge them, and you're going to say, hey, this is how well you did compared to what I needed you to do. And you either met the standards, you exceeded the standards, or you didn't. Like, what are we asking them, and what are we telling them if we're not clear?
If they didn't meet the standards,
that's different.
They didn't meet their job description,
totally different. Then you could look at the reasons why they didn't meet the standard and make assumptions as to why that didn't happen, right? And it could be because they're overly chit-chatty or whatever, right? Okay, but if they do meet them and they're still doing that, so the black and white, you just described black and white to me. Black and white is, you're not meeting the standard that I'm asking you to do from the start, but that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, I get it. It's going above and beyond.
And it's the gray, right?
Yeah.
It's the do you, right? So then it's the quiet quitting, it's the quiet firing, it's the I'm asking people to do more. The revolution has been, in the social revolution, the revolution has been, you're asking me to do this, this is what I'm going to do. You need to be okay with that, because for what? For how many years have we in order to make it to the top, you had to go above and beyond what you were being asked to do. And people aren't necessarily doing that. Like, they're being okay with just being, right? So then all of our motivational tricks about, well, I'll give you a bonus, or I'll give you this, and people are going, I'm okay. Like,
I just want more time at home. If not going above and beyond gives me more time at home, I'm going to do it. Yeah.
People are choosing, like, you think about it, and people are choosing lower paying jobs because it's offering them more time to do things. I did it.
And less stress.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to be at home because of whatever, because I knew that this was a time for those types of things. It's interesting. It all, how you communicate with those people, how you take high performance who used to doing one thing and then setting them out on their own, and balancing responsibility with outreach and of not talking to someone, and it's all very interesting dynamics now of business. And it, to me, someone asked me about the future of leadership, and I kind of said to them, it's about being able to handle change and being able to handle these types of things effectively, and having 17 different answers for one question,
and having an open mind.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And
my work ethic is that of, like, an industrial revolution. Like, I'm just going to work my tail off. I don't sit down till it's 8:39 at night. Like, it's just, what more can I do? And I know that that's not what a lot of people have.
Right. And it's not bad.
It's not bad. You're right. It's just different. And I have to honor that, and not,
because that's detrimental at some point,
and not try to create a mini me or get upset when they aren't like me.
Yeah, we had that. So it's really interesting you say that, because we had that problem. it's really interesting you say that, because we had that problem in the Navy. And what I used to tell people was, look, you're not trying to make them you. You're trying to get the best version of them out of, which may be very different from you, right? And they can get results very different maybe than you can get results.
And that's great. You don't want 100 of one person.
Correct. I would agree with that, of saying that we're the way that we shape our new leader. So here's the thing. You're a detriment because you work until not 8:30 at night. Right? I want you to think about that, though.
Detriment to who, though?
Detriment to everyone else, right? Because, so I want you to think about this, right? And you're not a detriment. Like, obviously, everybody loves you that you work to that degree. And this is for everybody, right?
And so let me clarify. It's not always my job. Like, I go.
No, I know that. No.
And then
we're talking about you, but it's not really you in this whole thing. But someone that is that grinder that works like that, right?
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. But what you can't do is to use that as the benchmark then to say, well, this is what you're supposed to do. No, you're not. It's not unless if your PD says that you work till that time, then that's great. But here's the kicker. You can't expect either, though, that when you get reviewed at the end of the year, if you don't get credit for all that, and that's just you, what if you get the same bonus as everybody else? How pissed are you? Right?
But for me, it's not about the money.
I know that. I'm not saying you.
No,
right?
I know.
Using you as an example, right? Because if that's the case and people go, dude, if you want to go above and beyond, go above and beyond. It'll come out. You'll get a different bonus than other people. Great. That's black and white compensated. But again, you can't hold it against somebody if that's not their kind of way. And just like communication, right? I can't hold it against people that they don't communicate a certain way or they're not used to a certain way. And that's on both ends of the spectrum. That's I would say acceptance generations who have less social media acceptance and newer generations who are changing social media communication faster than we can handle, right? Whatever's out new, this is what next that they're on, and why each one is a little bit different. And now because it's conversation migration, right? It's migrating from one source to another as to what's important and what's valid. And so I think that's important to understand, of saying, where does your conversation I don't know if conversation migration is a term, but I think
communication migration, maybe
communication migration is a good one, right? Like, and maybe we just coined it, of saying, look, maybe as a leader, you need to have conversation migration of where your conversation and how you communicate with your folks needs to move as you're doing, put it this way, even doing different things, right? I can remember like when WhatsApp first came out, like we would make certain groups that were just on WhatsApp because it was like easier to get to. And I get it. It was easier than, which I didn't understand, because you could easily do, a whole, everybody's on in one group in a
text message.
Yeah, in a text message. But that wasn't, it technically really wasn't easier, because then sometimes it's like blue or green and who's getting it, who wasn't. So it was easier just to go right. And the encryption of WhatsApp was,
and you'd have to scroll down to find that group again, as opposed to
right.
Yeah.
So you definitely can understand why it has happened that way and why it is migrated that. But these are all, listen, these are all interesting points. And I think, whatever the theme migrates to, whatever your business, to kind of start the wrap down here, whatever your business needs to communicate, it can be completely different than anyone else's, right? And or a different thing. And I think setting the tone, being clear, understanding who your employees are and the challenges they may face with it, and that's challenges of getting on board or challenges of already being, whatever it is. Like, you just have to kind of, again, set your foundations to how you're going to communicate with everybody, because I think that's, and you're making sure that your employee engagement points are being hit and everybody's kind of feeling like they understand it. And then with the last piece of it all too, I think just there's a fine line of where you got to find out what the chit chat is worth and what it's not, because there is value in it. There's value in the camaraderie, right? You have to put a price tag on that at some point. There's a loss, if you will, that maybe numbers people would look at, but I think, you know, it's got to be deemed acceptable, I think would be the right place, and really look at outcomes too.
Yeah, really great points.
Yeah. Anything else for today?
No, but I think I have already come up with our next topic.
Oh,
share that with you offline.
Oh, yeah, that'd be good to know. Well, good. Well, listen. So for everybody, sad day for us as well, because I want to tell everybody kind of what we're gonna do. This will be our last live Flipside rant. So what we'll end up doing next month, starting in 2023, is we are going to start to have recorded rants, which is fine, no big deal. It makes it easier for the engagement of you guys with leadership and sessions, so we can actually engage with you guys in small and large group sessions, rather than just doing this, and being able to rant. But we don't want to miss it. We still want to have Laura on and myself on to be able to kind of talk about the different leadership topics as we see it from our perspective. So we're going to do that. You're just not going to get them necessarily live. So, but they will be put out just like every other thing as episodes. They'll be on Lions Guide for you to be able to look at, and we'll start to kind of title them a little bit better starting in 2023. So today, thanks for stopping by. We appreciate you being here on the 1st December. The next time we see you, it'll be 2023. You'll have all your presents already done. You'll have the new year rung in. So we look forward to seeing you then. Any last words, kid?
No, I have a great holiday season, everybody.
Absolutely, everybody. We'll talk soon. And thanks for stopping by today on the rant. See y'all.